Hello again. It's time to look at this morning's papers now. Joining me again, the journalist and author Janelle Aldred and the political commentator Benedict Spence. Hello again to you both. Hopefully we're all slightly more awake, but you know. Benedict, let's start with you. The front of the Observer. Just take us through that.
So the front page of the Observer, story about strikes. Of course, we've had a number of strikes this year, most notably, I think, the railway workers and increasingly lawyers. But this is the story that the two largest unions in the UK, Unison and Unite, are planning to team up to really bring things to bear on the government. And this is in response, in their words at least, to a lack of action from the government in the face of the cost of living crisis. Of course, we all know the stories now about the scale of energy bills and the associated costs that come with that, food increases, rent increases, and the like. And, you know, this, I think, is... this is what you get, really, when you have two things. One is a lack of trust in your own government, and I think that is reflected in the fact that, yeah, as we said in the previous segment, we're all sort of sitting here still waiting for the government's response. We've got Boris Johnson writing in the Express and the Mail saying, yes, help is on the way, but nobody's quite sure, and we still have over a week to wait until there is a new Prime Minister. You know, this is what happens when you don't have any trust in your government, is that, you know, unions do take things into their own hands. There is no sense of we're all in this together. There's far more a sense of, well, I need to look out for myself because I can't trust the authorities to help me. But this is also, I think, what happens when you have a lack of trust in the opposition. Now, of course, Labour historically would be the party of the strikers, of the workers. But I think Keir Starmer is treading a bit of a tightrope at the moment, in that his entire raison d'etre was about detoxifying the Labour Party after the Jeremy Corbyn years. Now, obviously, most people like to think about that purely in terms of the anti-Semitism crisis that the Labour Party underwent, but there was also this idea, wasn't there, that Jeremy Corbyn was a far more sort of militant Labour leader, and that he was taking the country back in a direction more towards sort of the 1980s and the militant tendency and the mass strikes that we had in the 70s around then. Keir Starmer, I think, in order, in his opinion at least, to appeal to sort of those voters that he needs to win back, Middle England, you know, places that are not, you know, sort of hard-nosed working class areas that are most affected by this. I think he feels the need to separate himself out from, you know, the slightly more militant side of left-wing politics, which is unions going on strike. The difficulty, of course, then, is that he appears to be slightly unfeeling, uncaring, and out of touch, both with workers and his own party, but also increasingly, I think, members of the public, because the one thing that we are seeing, I think, about this particular crisis is that it is affecting not just the working classes, it is affecting the middle classes en masse as well. There is rather a lot of support, rather more support actually, for some of the strikers, especially the railway workers, than we have seen in the past. Of course, you know, the law is a very middle class profession, so when you see barristers going on strike, you know, most middle class families know somebody who, you know, at least know one person who is involved in the law. And so it's something that they can't really pass off as just, you know, one group, you know, trying to look out for themselves. But ultimately, this is how it manifests. When democracy, when trust sort of breaks down in the two democratic parties, the one that's in power and the opposition, unions have to take matters into their own hands through whatever means they have, and that means going on strike.
Okay, let's stick with the Observer, but look at page 10, Janelle. Why are Ukrainian refugees, quote, facing homelessness on a mass scale?
Yeah, so in the wake of the invasion, about 83,000, well, close to 84,000 Ukrainians arrived and were given places in people's homes, and they say that about half of those could be homeless by winter and around 50,000 homeless by next year. Now, this is all not helped by the rising energy prices, the length of the invasion or the war. It was thought it would be over very quickly, like we thought about COVID. We've been proven wrong on all counts, and actually it's been going on a lot longer than people had expected. Now, the thank you payment that families got when they sponsored a Ukrainian refugee, it was nice but not sufficient, and definitely not sufficient in the face of rising energy costs, rising bills, the cost of food, all of these things that become your bills when you're sponsoring someone. And then there's a double whammy of it being 6 months' time but not long enough for a lot of people to seek suitable housing. So some refugees are saying when they go to look for housing, they're being told that, you know, landlords don't want to have house refugees. And so we're going into a perfect storm situation where there will become a big strain on local councils as they have to seek to rehouse people or make them homeless. Now, when this bill was introduced by Michael Gove, the Levelling Up Secretary at the time, the Shadow Secretary for Labour, Lisa Nandy, she had raised in Parliament, what is the long-term plan for this? Because, of course, any sensible person looking beyond the end of their nose will realise at some point you can't just ask people to sponsor people for a long time. Again, this is people's homes. At the time, I did say, how will it go when it's time to either say, move on? What if that person doesn't have somewhere else to go? Now we're at that bridge, about to cross it, and the government are going to need to intervene because it's a lot of people, a massive strain. They can't go back to Ukraine because that invasion's still going on. But if they can't stay where they are, then where are these 50,000 people going to go? And this is a bridge that we have to cross, and we need answers.
Well, let's see if they provide us with any of those answers. Benedict, let's go to Benedict. Are you ready? Telegraph, page 12. Iran.
Oh, I'm very ready. This is a great story.
Is it? Yeah. So talk us through this because this, it's a difficult one. Off you go.
It is. Obviously, the issues around Iran, they never go away. It's the Obama administration's nuclear deal that the United States pulled out under Donald Trump. It's back on the table, and there's been a lot of sort of will they, won't they about this. Iran has been playing much harder, I think, with the US this time around in an effort to get this done. And the Biden administration wants a foreign policy win, especially after the debacle in Afghanistan. And given that the Trump administration has the Abraham Accords, it needs this for its own legacy. The problem is, of course, a lot of Iran's rivals in the region, specifically Israel, and that's what this story goes into. The Israelis are very concerned about the resurrection of a nuclear deal that the Israelis say will allow Iran to have hundreds of billions in assets unfrozen and sanctions unfrozen that will go directly towards funding its military and proxy activities around the region, which of course poses a direct threat to Israel, either by Lebanon or Syria or Iran itself. And on top of that, the Israelis say that Iran doesn't stick to the terms of the deal. They didn't stick to it first time around, and there is a lot of evidence to suggest that they didn't. That they would reduce their nuclear activity by around 97% in order for it purely to be done along civilian lines. They didn't do that last time. What the Israelis are saying is this isn't going to happen again. They're going to continue to enrich uranium at a level that would allow them to escalate the development of nuclear weapons should they wish to.
Okay.
And we all know where those would be.
We've got to leave it there. Benedict and Janelle, we'll see you next hour. Thank you both so much.